She was just asking for directions. He was just trying to save his baby. But when a desperate single dad ran into the wrong car on a rainy morning, neither of them knew it would be the beginning of something that could change all their lives. Before we dive in, if you enjoy emotional, heartwarming stories that stay with you long after they end, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It helps us grow and brings you more stories that truly matter. Now, let's begin. Single dad rushed into the CEO's car with his baby. He didn't know she'd fall in love with them all. The child wasn't breathing right. Ethan's boots slapped against the cracked pavement of Maple Avenue as he raced out of the drugstore, cradling his 7-month-old daughter against his chest. Her skin was clammy, her breath coming in short, fast gasps, and her tiny fingers were curled tightly into the collar of his jacket. He didn't care that he'd left the diaper bag behind. He didn't care that the pharmacist had yelled after him something about paperwork. All he knew was that Maddie had been fine this morning, and now she wasn't. "Hold on, baby girl," he whispered, brushing a trembling hand against her damp forehead. "Daddy's got you." His beat-up Ford pickup, the one with the transmission that coughed more than it ran, sat useless a block away. He had jogged from there to save time, but now he realized the mistake. No cab, no ambulance, no one nearby but strangers who pretended not to see a man in panic. That's when he saw it. A sleek black SUV engine still running, parked at the curb just ahead. Luxury leather spotless windows and a vanity plate that screamed corporate money. The driver's window was rolled halfway down, and a woman inside was holding a GPS device, frowning as if it had personally insulted her. She was dressed in a tailored navy blazer, her dark hair tied into a sharp bun that didn't move even when she turned. Ethan didn't think. He ran straight to the car and slammed his palm against the passenger window. "Please, I need help. My baby, she can't. She's not breathing right. I need a hospital. Now." The woman flinched. She stared at him for a second too long, eyes narrowing, hand hovering over the gear shift as if she was about to speed off. Ethan saw the split-second calculation in her eyes. He looked like a madman, scruffy flannel, unshaven jaw, a baby bundled in his coat. This was the part where the rich lady locked the doors. But she didn't. She popped the lock, leaned across, and shoved the door open. "Get in," she said. Her voice was cold, clipped. She didn't ask questions. Ethan climbed in, clutching Maddie tighter, his heart pounding. The woman didn't introduce herself, didn't even look at him. She just pulled into traffic and gunned the engine. "Nearest hospital," she demanded. "County General, 13 blocks, right at the next light." She nodded once, then turned sharply, making the tires squeal. Ethan held Maddie close, whispering to her as the car lunged forward. The baby whimpered once, then went silent again. Claire Whitmore didn't know why she let them in. She hated detours. Her GPS had sent her into this podunk town on some back road that wasn't even in the updated maps. She had an investor meeting in the city. She had no time for delays, much less stray men and sick children. But something about the look in his eyes, that raw desperation, that was a kind of fear even money couldn't fake. She glanced sideways as he rocked the baby gently. The child's face was flushed, eyes half-lidded, lips too pale. "How long has she been like this?" Claire asked. 15 minutes, Ethan rasped. "She had a fever this morning. I gave her Tylenol. Then I noticed her wheezing, and now she's barely." Claire slammed her hand against the horn as the sedan cut them off. "Do you have insurance?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. His silence said everything. They reached the hospital in 6 minutes flat. Ethan didn't wait for the car to stop completely. He threw open the door and sprinted inside with Maddie in his arms. Claire watched the emergency doors swing shut behind him. For a moment, she sat frozen. The sound of the child's rasping breath lingered in her ears like a ghost. She could leave now. No one expected anything of her. She wasn't family, wasn't even supposed to be in this town. But she didn't start the engine. Inside the ER, Ethan was pacing, eyes locked on the triage nurse behind the glass. Maddie had been taken back for immediate evaluation, and now there was nothing to do but wait. He stared down at the admission clipboard they'd handed him. No insurance, no recent medical history, no primary physician. And he hadn't even brought his wallet. The glass door swung open again. Claire walked in like she owned the hospital. Straight lines, hard heels, sharp eyes. She went to the front desk, whispered something to the administrator, then placed a sleek black card on the counter. Ethan saw the nurse's face change. A nod, a glance in his direction. The administrator came back with a softer tone. "Sir, your daughter is being evaluated now. We'll take care of her. Don't worry about the paperwork." Claire didn't come to him. She just gave him a brief, unreadable look, then turned to leave. Ethan caught her by the arm before she reached the door. "I don't even know your name," he said. She hesitated, then replied, "Claire. That's it. That's all you need." And then she was gone. He stood there for a long while, watching the taillights disappear into the city fog. Maddie was in good hands, but Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that he had just been caught in something far bigger than a wrong turn. Something had shifted, and neither of them was ready for what came next. The hospital room was quiet now, save for the soft hum of machines and the occasional beep that monitored Maddie's vitals. She was sleeping soundly, cheeks flushed but calm, her small chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. Ethan sat slouched in a hard plastic chair beside the crib, his hands clasped between his knees, head bowed. He had no idea how long he'd been there. Hours, maybe. Time moved differently when your child was in danger. The doctor had said Maddie would be fine. A high fever, early signs of bronchiolitis. They'd caught it early. She just needed fluids rest and a close watch. It should have been a relief, and it was, but the aftershock still echoed through Ethan's bones. He felt hollow, exhausted, and unshakably aware of how close he'd come to losing her. He stood, stretched his back, and kissed his daughter's forehead. Her skin was cooler now. The meds were working. He needed to find the woman. Claire. He didn't know her last name. Didn't know what she did, where she came from, or why on earth someone like her had stopped for someone like him. But she had without hesitation, without question, and she'd paid for Maddie's emergency care like it was a cup of coffee. No name, no billing address. Just a platinum card and a command. Take care of the child. Ethan found the nurse who'd admitted them. "Do you know the name of the woman who brought us in?" The nurse glanced up from her clipboard. "You mean the one with the fancy car?" "Yeah. Claire. I need to thank her. She didn't give a last name. Just told the desk to bill everything to her. Said it was confidential." The nurse smiled. "You don't get many like that around here." "No," Ethan murmured. "You really don't." Outside the hospital, the late afternoon sun was beginning to dip, painting long amber shadows across the lot. Ethan unlocked his truck, slung the empty diaper bag into the passenger seat, and just sat behind the wheel for a long minute. His heart was still raw, thoughts looping on repeat. He had nothing to offer her. No means to pay her back. No way to even reach her. But he owed her more than money. The next morning, Ethan was back at work, dust-covered, sweat-soaked, and going through the motions at Carter's Woodworks. He'd taken the job 6 years ago, just after Maddie's mom passed. It was stable, quiet work, fixing antique chairs, carving detail into window frames, restoring old pieces for locals who couldn't afford to buy new. Today, though, his hands weren't steady. He kept seeing Claire's face, the way she gripped the wheel. Her voice calm, even cold, but steady. How she didn't flinch at the sight of a baby gasping for breath. Most people, most strangers would have kept driving. But she didn't. "Earth to Ethan," a voice cut in. Ethan looked up to see Mrs. Gardner standing at the workshop's open bay door, holding a brown paper bag and a curious smile. He exhaled, grateful. "Morning, Mrs. G. I brought lunch. Turkey on rye. You still eat right, barely." He chuckled, wiping his hands on a rag. "Thanks." She stepped in, setting the bag on his bench. Her graying hair was tucked under a wide-brimmed straw hat, eyes still sharp despite her age. "Word travels fast in a small town," she said gently. "Heard what happened yesterday?" Ethan nodded. "You okay? not even close. Mrs. Gardner sat down on the edge of a work table, folded her arms. "Want to talk about her?" Ethan raised a brow. "The woman," she said. "The one who helped you. Don't pretend like she didn't leave an impression." Ethan smiled despite himself. "Her name's Claire. That's all I know. She had a car that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Paid for everything. Didn't say why. Just drove off." Mrs. Gardner studied him for a beat, then handed him a folded napkin. Inside was a small wooden heart. "I made that when my husband died," she said. "It reminded me that sometimes the most beautiful people are the ones who arrive when you don't deserve them and stay long enough to remind you that you do." Ethan blinked. The old woman had a way of cutting straight through him. He tucked the carving into his pocket. Claire hadn't planned to go back, but the following Friday she found herself turning off the main highway following the same cracked road into town. It was absurd. She had deadlines, investors, a presentation on vertical farming models in Minneapolis next week. Jared had practically begged her not to vanish again. You don't disappear for 3 days and come back without a story, he'd warned. Claire had shrugged. "I wasn't gone. I was rerouted." She didn't understand it herself. The place was quiet, full of flannel shirts and creaky porches. Nothing here looked like her world, but something about it stilled her. She parked in front of a small wood shop with sun-faded signage and open windows that smelled of cedar and varnish. Through the glass, she saw him, Ethan, bent over a workbench carving something by hand. No noise, no machines, just his hands, his craft, his world. And for reasons she couldn't explain, she walked through the door. Ethan looked up as the bell chimed. The chisel froze in his hand. Claire stood in the doorway as if time had paused to let her in. She wasn't in a blazer this time. Just jeans, a cream-colored blouse, and flats. Still sharp, but softer. "I was in the area," she said. "You don't look like someone who gets lost twice," he replied. A faint smile. "I'm starting to think I wasn't lost the first time." He set the chisel down. "I never got to say thank you." "You did," she said. "The second you got in my car." Silence stretched between them. "I still don't know who you are," Ethan said. Claire tilted her head. "You think that matters?" He shook his head. "No, but I'd like to." And for the first time, Claire Whitmore extended her hand, not to give, not to sign, not to command, just to connect. "Claire," she said again, but this time, "stay a while." And Ethan, with the heart of a man who'd learned to trust, slowly nodded. "Ethan," he said, taking her hand. "And Maddie, she remembers you." Ethan wasn't expecting her again. Not after someone like her had already done more than anyone else in his life ever had. People like Claire didn't circle back. They didn't show up twice, especially not in a town with only one diner, 2 stoplights, and the kind of silences that told stories better than words. But on Tuesday morning, the black SUV returned. It pulled up in front of the wood shop just as Ethan was hauling a reupholstered rocking chair out for delivery. He wiped the sweat off his brow with the edge of his shirt heart, skipping, unsure whether he was seeing things or wanting to. Claire stepped out in heels, too polished for gravel, and a navy wrap dress that looked wildly out of place next to the rusted mailbox leaning on its last screw. But something about the way she carried herself, slightly less rigid, as if her shoulders remembered how to let go, felt different. She didn't look at the chair. She looked at him. "I was just passing through," she said. Ethan smiled. "Second time this week," Claire hesitated. "It's a long drive back to the city. Thought I'd stretch my legs." She didn't say it, but Ethan heard it anyway. "I thought about you." He gestured toward the open shop door. "Come in. Maddie's sleeping in the back." Claire paused at the threshold. It smelled of pine dust, linseed oil, and warm light. Wooden benches lined the walls, and pieces of furniture in various stages of completion sat like ghosts of stories waiting to be told. "You made all this?" she asked, trailing her fingers along the edge of a walnut cabinet. Ethan nodded. "Every joint, every groove." "I learned from my grandfather. It's not fancy, but it holds." Claire ran her hand across the surface again. It's honest. He tilted his head. You say that like it's rare. She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out a slim folder. I had a contractor drop these by mistake at your neighbor's house, she lied smoothly. I figured while I was in the area. Ethan didn't even open it. Claire, you didn't come here for blueprints. She looked up sharply, eyes flickering like a caught match. Then, softly, no. I didn't. There it was. The truth standing between them, fragile but unafraid. They sat outside under the covered awning of the shop, the afternoon heat settling into the wood. Claire sipped from a glass of lemonade Ethan had poured, tapping one manicured finger against the rim. Your daughter, she said. How's she doing? Better every day. Thanks to you. Ethan glanced through the open window where Maddie slept in her playpen, one hand clutching a stuffed bunny with only one eye. She smiled at me, Claire said, her voice a whisper. That day, when I picked her up. Ethan nodded. She remembers people, especially the ones who make her feel safe. Claire looked away, blinking into the sun. No one's ever said that about me. Maybe they didn't stay long enough to find out. She turned to face him, then brows drawn. Why are you being kind to me? The question caught him off guard. He set his drink down slowly. You helped save my daughter's life. That's not something you forget. That's not kindness, she said. That was instinct. Cold math. You needed a ride. I had a car. Ethan leaned back, crossing one leg over the other. You didn't have to stay. You didn't have to cover the bill. You didn't have to come back. Claire looked down. I haven't done anything that wasn't in a spreadsheet in over a decade. He let the silence rest between them like a cushion neither wanted to disturb. Finally, Claire broke it. I used to be someone else, Ethan. Before the boardrooms and the IPOs. Before everything got so efficient. Still in there, he asked gently. I don't know, she said. Maybe she got buried under the quarterly reports. Ethan smiled. I've dug up worse things than that from old wood. The next moment belonged to Maddie. From inside the shop came a soft coo, then a thud, followed by a giggle. Claire stood almost too fast and crossed into the room. Maddie sat in her playpen wide-eyed and reaching up with both arms. For Claire. She hesitated at the edge, but the baby didn't. Maddie leaned against the side of the pen and made a soft sound somewhere between a laugh and a demand. Claire bent down, unsure of her hands, but Ethan nodded from the doorway. You can pick her up. Her arms were stiffer than they should have been, but Maddie settled in like she belonged there. Her fingers curled around Claire's collarbone. The tiny heart against hers beat warm and sure. Claire whispered something inaudible and held the child close, rocking ever so slightly a movement she hadn't made in 13 years. Ethan watched chest tight. I've never seen her that calm with anyone but me, he said quietly. Claire didn't look up. She reminds me that I'm not made of steel. They stood in silence until Maddie drifted off again. I have to go, Claire said softly, easing the baby back into her pen. Meetings. People expecting things. Will you come back? She gave him a long, unreadable look. I'm not sure what happens when I do. Ethan offered the simplest truth he knew. Maybe you don't have to know yet. Claire turned to leave, but paused at the doorway. I wasn't lost, she said. That first time. No, I just hadn't found the right reason to stop before. And with that, she stepped back into her SUV, pulled away from the curb, and drove off, leaving behind the faint scent of her perfume, a sleeping child, and a man whose life had just started to shift without him fully realizing it. But something told him she would be back. Not because she had to, but because this time she wanted to. Saturday arrived with the kind of hush that only small towns understood. The breeze was soft, the sunlight lazy, and the porch steps creaked beneath Ethan's boots as he sat with a mug of coffee watching Maddie gum a piece of biscuit in her high chair beside him. It had become a ritual. Saturday mornings were theirs. Quiet, slow, and full of the things that made life feel real again. But this Saturday had something else. expectation. He hadn't told her to come. Claire hadn't promised anything. And yet, there was a space at the table beside him. A second mug, warm but untouched. At 9:14 a.m., the sound of tires on gravel broke the morning silence. Ethan didn't have to look to know. She came back. The SUV eased to a stop in front of his house, modest, worn down in places, but solid in the way only things built with love could be. Claire stepped out dressed in jeans and a soft cream sweater, her hair loose for the first time. She looked like someone who had once remembered what comfort felt like and was slowly, carefully letting herself remember it again. "Good morning," she said, hands tucked into her pockets. "I thought CEOs slept in on Saturdays," Ethan replied. "Only the smart ones," she said, and then with a small smile, "I never learned how." He gestured toward the empty chair. "There's coffee." She hesitated, then sat. Her movements were more relaxed than before, but she still held herself like someone who wasn't sure how long she'd be welcome. Maddie babbled loudly, throwing the half-eaten biscuit on the floor in protest. Claire knelt to pick it up without hesitation, wiping it clean with a cloth before handing it back. "You don't need to do that," Ethan said gently. "I know," she replied, "but I want to." The morning stretched into an easy rhythm. Ethan brought out fresh-cut pears and slices of warm cornbread. Maddie alternated between naps and demands for attention. Claire didn't check her phone once. They sat on the porch swing as Maddie napped inside. "You know," Claire said, "when I was a kid, my mother never let me play outside after breakfast. Said it wasted my focus for the day." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "That's tragic." Claire laughed softly. It was efficient. Everything was scheduled. Piano lessons, Mandarin debate prep. Even relaxation had time limits. "Let me guess, you rebelled by color-coding your calendar." "No," she said, smirking. "I skipped a meeting once to eat a peanut butter sandwich in the park. I thought I was a criminal. Sounds like you still carry that sentence." Claire's smile faded a little. "I do." There was a pause, one of those rare silences where vulnerability waited patiently to be let in. Ethan turned toward her. "You don't have to earn your time here, Claire. Not with me. Not with Maddie." She looked away. "It's not you I'm trying to prove it to." Later that day, Ethan invited Claire inside. The house was simple, clean, but lived in. Books lined the shelves, mismatched furniture fit together like puzzle pieces, and the scent of pinewood soap clung to the air. Claire noticed the small things, a quilt folded neatly at the foot of the couch, a single photo of Ethan holding newborn Maddie with eyes still red from grief. "This place is—" She began, but her voice trailed off. What Ethan asked. Warm. Real. "Everything in my life is either glass or steel or something that costs more than it should." "You miss something different. I'm not sure I ever had it," she admitted. Ethan said nothing. He just walked to a shelf, pulled down a carved music box, and wound it once. A soft melody filled the room, simple, tender, and surprisingly soothing. "My dad made this when I was 5, he said. He said music should feel like a hug you didn't ask for." Claire closed her eyes as it played. That's exactly what it feels like. By late afternoon, Maddie had awoken from her nap with a cough and a stuffy nose. Claire immediately stood concern flashing across her face. "Is she okay?" Ethan checked her temperature. "Just a cold. She gets like this when the weather changes." Claire looked unconvinced. "Should we take her to urgent care, I can drive." He held up a hand. "Claire, it's okay. I've got this." It wasn't a dismissal. It was a quiet confidence born from sleepless nights and learned patience. And somehow that made Claire feel more exposed than any boardroom ever had. She began, then stopped. "You're worried he finished for her. That's allowed." She sat back down, visibly unsettled. "I don't know how to do this. Be near people. Trust they won't fall apart. Or worse, need me to hold them together." "You don't need to hold anyone together," Ethan said. "You just need to stay." As the sun dipped toward the horizon, Claire stood on the porch, staring out at the woods beyond the backyard. Maddie was asleep again, curled up against Ethan's chest in the recliner inside. Claire breathed in the scent of damp leaves wood smoke from a distant chimney and something she hadn't let herself feel in years, peace. When she turned to go, Ethan followed her outside. "I know this isn't your world," he said, "but you're always welcome here." She hesitated. "Why?" "Because Maddie smiles when she sees you. And so do I." Claire looked at him then, long and full of something neither of them had named yet. She reached for the doorknob of her car but stopped. "I can come back next Saturday?" She asked the question, quiet and small. Ethan nodded. "We'll be here." She got into the SUV but didn't start it immediately. Instead, she sat behind the wheel, hands on her lap, staring out the windshield with eyes that shimmered faintly in the fading light. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was on a schedule. She felt like she was finding something that couldn't be planned. A place, a rhythm, a promise. Claire drove through the city with the kind of stillness that unnerved even her own driver. She wasn't scheduled to be back until Monday, but something about the silence in her penthouse condo had become louder than any boardroom debate. The leather seats and skyline view couldn't drown it out anymore. At every red light, her mind drifted back to Ethan's front porch, the swing that creaked with life, the way Maddie's eyes lit up when Claire walked in, and Ethan's quiet voice when he said, "You don't have to earn your time here." She'd never heard that before, never believed it could be true. Her phone buzzed for the 5th time that hour. Jared again. She finally answered. "I'm 10 minutes away." "Perfect," Jared said. "Your mother's waiting in the boardroom." Claire exhaled slowly. Of course she is. The Whitmore building sat like a glass monolith in the heart of downtown. Clean lines, stark edges, not a single wasted inch. Claire walked through its lobby like she always had, heels, silent spine-straight expression unreadable. But something felt different now, like the walls knew. The meeting began before she sat down. This partnership with Eastwell Asia her mother began is time-sensitive. You need to be in Singapore next week. The Agritech presentation is scheduled and the investors? "I'm not going," Claire said. The room fell silent. Jared dropped his pen. Her mother blinked once. "Excuse me." "I'm not going," Claire repeated calmly. "We can send Marcus and the team. I've already reviewed the materials." "You are the face of this brand, Claire. You don't just get to delegate your responsibilities when the wind changes." Claire folded her hands. "I'm not delegating. I'm prioritizing." Her mother's voice turned to ice. "And what exactly is so important that it overrides your position, your future, your name?" Claire hesitated. For a moment, Ethan's face flashed across her mind. Maddie's little fingers wrapping around hers, the smell of sawdust, the sound of laughter that wasn't forced. "I'm building something different," she said finally. "Something that doesn't need my signature to be worth something." Her mother stood. "You're emotional." "I'm human," Claire replied. "Try it sometime." The words stunned even herself. As the boardroom emptied, Jared lingered. "That was new," he said, offering her a paper cup of coffee. "I know," she murmured. It felt good. He paused. "Is this about the guy?" Claire gave him a sidelong glance. "What guy?" Jared smiled. "The guy who made you say no in front of your mother and the board without blinking. That guy." Claire didn't answer. Instead, she turned back to the window and watched the world below continue to spin impersonal and endless. And for the first time in a long while, she didn't want to be a part of it. She wanted to be somewhere slower, somewhere honest. The next morning, she drove back to the town without warning. This time she didn't park in front of the wood shop. She drove straight to the house. Ethan was in the backyard, shirt sleeves rolled up, repairing the fence, while Maddie sat nearby on a blanket, chewing on a wooden toy he'd carved. Claire stepped out of her car and stood silently for a moment, taking it in. The scene didn't feel like something she was watching. It felt like something she was missing. Ethan looked up and smiled. "Well, look who couldn't wait until Saturday." Claire shrugged. "Deadlines are overrated." He wiped his hands on a rag and nodded toward the porch swing. Come sit. Maddie's been working on her royal wave." As she stepped into the yard, Maddie shrieked in glee and extended both arms toward her. Claire scooped her up, instinctively surprised at how natural it now felt to hold her. "She missed you," Ethan said. Claire brushed a curl from Maddie's cheek. "I missed her." She paused. "And you?" Ethan's gaze softened. "That's good, because I think you're starting to belong here." Claire looked down. "That's the part that scares me." That evening, after Maddie had fallen asleep in her crib inside, Ethan lit a small fire in the backyard pit and handed Claire a mug of tea. The night was quiet, stars hanging overhead like promises not yet broken. "I told my mother no," Claire said, breaking the silence. For the first time in years. Ethan arched a brow. "That must have gone over well. She told me I was risking everything." "And are you?" Claire stared into the flames. "I don't know, but for once, I want to risk something that feels real." Ethan leaned back in his chair. "You don't have to prove anything here. Not to me. Not to Maddie." "I don't think I'm trying to prove it to you," she said softly. "I think I'm trying to prove it to her." "Your mom?" Claire shook her head. "No. The version of me I left behind a long time ago. The one who used to laugh. The one who dreamed of a life that didn't come with a quarterly report." Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his pocket and handed her something small, a carved wooden heart. Claire turned it over in her hands, noticing the initials M.E. etched on the back. "I made it after my wife passed," Ethan said, "to remind me that even when something breaks, you can still carry the pieces with you. Doesn't mean they'll cut forever." Claire clutched the heart tightly. No one had ever given her something so simple, yet so profound. She looked at Ethan. "Thank you for seeing me." Ethan met her eyes. "You're hard not to see, Claire, once someone really looks." And in that moment, surrounded by stars, silence, and the scent of firewood, Claire Whitmore realized that she wasn't being rescued. She was being rebuilt from the inside out. It rained on the following Thursday. Not a hard, angry downpour, just a quiet, persistent drizzle that softened the world into hushed grays and distant echoes. Ethan stood by the kitchen window with Maddie nestled against his chest, her head tucked under his chin. She'd been fighting off a low-grade fever all night, the kind that made her clingy and restless, refusing to sleep unless she could hear his heartbeat. The coffee had gone cold an hour ago. He didn't care. He looked out at the yard where the garden soaked up the rain and the swing on the porch swayed gently in the wind. He didn't expect her to come today. It wasn't Saturday. And yet, a black SUV turned onto the gravel drive. Ethan didn't move, didn't smile, just quietly held his daughter a little closer. Claire stepped out wearing a raincoat, her hair pulled back but loose enough that the humidity curled the ends. She carried a paper bag in one hand and a look on her face he hadn't seen before. Not guarded, not confident, something closer to asking. He opened the door before she knocked. "I heard she wasn't feeling well," Claire said, holding up the bag. "Chicken broth, and I brought a copy of Goodnight Moon." Ethan's brow lifted. "That's a bold choice." Claire gave a faint smirk. "It's on the list of top 10 books that make adults cry." Figured it was appropriate. She stepped inside, her eyes immediately falling to Maddie. The baby whimpered softly, then reached a hand toward her. Without thinking, Claire took her. It wasn't awkward anymore. She adjusted Maddie on her hip as if she'd done it 100 times before. "She looks flushed," she murmured, her brows knitting. "Did you call the doctor?" "Yes. They said it's viral. Lots of fluids, close watch, no panicking." Claire exhaled, slowly, rocking gently. Okay. Ethan watched her, arms crossed loosely, voice quiet. "You could have called." "I didn't want to call," she said. "I needed to see her." She looked up. "I needed to see both of you." They sat in the living room, the fire crackling, low books and wooden toys scattered around them like tiny reminders of a life lived fully, if not perfectly. Claire fed Maddie spoonfuls of warm broth while Ethan reheated the coffee. The rain tapped a soft rhythm against the roof. "You look tired," Claire said. Ethan passed her a mug. "Parenthood isn't a weekend job." She nodded. "Neither is healing." He turned toward her. "That what this is?" Healing. Claire hesitated. "It's something. I used to think if I kept my schedule full enough, if I made myself indispensable, I'd never have to feel anything again." Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "What changed?" "I held her," Claire said, looking down at Maddie. "That first time. The way she looked at me like I wasn't broken, like I hadn't failed." Ethan didn't interrupt. She needed to say this. "I made a choice 13 years ago," Claire continued. "I had just been promoted. My mother said it wasn't the right time. Said I had responsibilities, that a child would ruin everything." Her voice tightened. And I believed her. Silence. Thick, not uncomfortable, just heavy with things never said aloud before. "I walked into that clinic alone," Claire said, "and I walked out feeling like something inside me had shut off. Permanently. I built a world around that silence, built a career on not needing anyone." Ethan set down his coffee. His voice was steady, quiet. And now Claire looked at him. "Now." I hear her laugh, and it sounds like the thing I've been waiting to remember. Maddie stirred against her, soft and warm and unaware that she was healing a heart simply by being. "I don't know how to be a mother," Claire whispered. "Not really, not biologically, but sometimes I think I could be something. To her. If I knew how to start." Ethan reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You already did." That night, after Maddie had fallen asleep on Claire's chest, they carried her into the nursery together. Claire lingered by the crib, watching the baby breathe, watching her tiny chest rise and fall in steady rhythm. She turned to Ethan. "She trusts me." "Of course she does." "No," Claire said. "I mean, she chooses me, even though I'm not hers." Ethan stepped beside her. "Family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when it matters." Claire looked at him. "And why do you keep letting me in?" He considered that, then answered honestly. "Because you show up. You don't just send flowers and walk away. You come back. You stay. And that means more than you think." She didn't reply, just stood there feeling the quiet wrap around them both. Later, Claire sat on the porch swing watching the rain finally taper off into mist. Ethan joined her, draping a blanket over her lap. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Finally, she said, "I told my mother I wouldn't go to Singapore. She said I was throwing everything away." Ethan leaned back. "And are you?" Claire looked toward the nursery window where a soft nightlight glowed behind the curtain. "No," she said. "For the first time, I'm holding on to something that matters." Ethan nodded slowly. "Then maybe you're not throwing it away. Maybe you're just trading up." She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that grew from pain and peace at once. Then, after a long pause, she said softly, "You think she'll remember me?" Ethan turned to her. "She already does." Claire stared at the stars beginning to peek through the clouds, and for the first time in years she felt a different kind of certainty. This wasn't a visit. This wasn't a detour. It was the beginning of a road she never planned to take, but had somehow always needed. It had taken Claire exactly 3 days to return to Ethan's house after the rainy night, but to her it felt like weeks. This time she didn't bring soup or books or excuses. She brought something else, something small, tucked carefully inside a craft paper bag she carried like it was more fragile than it looked. Ethan met her at the door, sleeves rolled apron stained with wood glue and sawdust. "You've been busy," she said, nodding toward the pieces of furniture lined along the porch waiting for finish and polish. He smiled. Deadlines. Small-town ones, but deadlines just the same. She stepped inside without hesitation now, like someone who'd earned the right not to knock. Maddie squealed from her playpen in the living room and began bouncing at the sight of Claire's little fists pounding the rail with joy. Claire scooped her up and kissed her forehead. "I missed you too," she whispered. Ethan watched from the kitchen, letting the sight settle into his chest. There was no fear in Claire's body anymore. No stiff posture. No panic when the baby cried. Just grace. And something that might have been love. An hour later, while Maddie napped in the back room, Claire and Ethan sat on the porch swing, the late afternoon light settling golden against the trees. Claire handed him the paper bag. "It's not much," she said, "but I wanted you to have it." Ethan unwrapped it slowly and pulled out a thin wooden picture frame. It wasn't store-bought, not polished, rough at the corners, uneven in places. But it was carved delicately, thoughtfully, and inside was a photograph she had printed, the three of them, taken by Mrs. Gardner apparently on the last Saturday. Claire holding Maddie, Ethan beside them reaching for the baby's tiny hand, all of them smiling. At the bottom of the frame, burned into the wood by hand, were the words, "For the days you stayed." Ethan didn't say anything. Not at first. He just ran his fingers over the letters. Claire's voice broke the quiet. "I know I didn't stay once. A long time ago. You don't have to explain." "Yes, I do," she said, eyes fixed on the horizon. "You deserve to understand the whole picture." Ethan leaned back, waiting, listening. "I was 25, she said, freshly promoted, first woman VP in the company's history. I thought I had everything, and then I got pregnant." She didn't pause for drama. She didn't cry. "My mother told me I'd lose everything if I kept it, that no man would ever respect me, that it would soften my image." She gave a bitter laugh. And the worst part, I believed her. So I did what I thought strong women did. I let it go. Ethan looked at her not with judgment, but with something softer, a sadness that wasn't pity, but recognition. "You didn't let it go," he said. "You buried it. But it's still there." Claire nodded slowly. "And every day since I've built walls around it, around me, until I didn't recognize who I was protecting anymore." The picture frame sat between them, the smiling photo catching the light. "I don't know how to be soft," she said. "I know how to close a deal, how to fire a team, how to cut losses. But this," she gestured toward the house. The swing, the baby's blanket draped over the railing. "This is where I fall apart." "Maybe falling apart," Ethan said gently, "is how you start rebuilding." That evening, Claire lingered longer than usual. Mrs. Gardner stopped by with a tin of cornbread and a story about her late husband and how he once built a bookshelf upside down, just to prove that not every mistake needed to be fixed. "You just had to see it from another angle," she said, tapping Claire's knee with affection. After the older woman left, Claire stood in the living room looking at a shelf Ethan had crafted. Simple, elegant, imperfect. "I think I've been upside down for a long time," she murmured. Ethan stood beside her. "Then maybe we stop trying to fix it. Maybe we just look at it differently." Claire turned to him. "You really believe people can change? That late in the game, I think people can heal. That's a different thing." She took a breath. "And if I'm still broken, then I'll remind you that you're not," he said. "Every time you forget." There was a stillness between them then, not from hesitation but from reverence. Later that night, as she slipped out the door, Claire paused and looked back. The picture frame now sat on the mantel above the fireplace, exactly where Ethan had placed it without a word. "Ethan," she said, hand resting on the doorknob. "I don't know where this is going. I don't have a 5-year plan for us." He walked toward her slowly. "I wouldn't want one. I just know," she continued, voice quieter, "that when I'm here it feels like I've stopped holding my breath." Ethan smiled, stepping close enough to brush her hand with his. Then, "Breathe, Claire. Stay. Come back. Whatever you need. Just don't disappear." She nodded, and for the first time in her life, Claire Whitmore didn't leave with a goal or a deadline or a script. She left with something far more dangerous. Hope. The night began like any other, quiet, steady, peaceful. The air carried the scent of late summer with a soft breeze drifting through the windows of Ethan's home. Maddie had been a bit fussy at dinner, pushing away her food and whining more than usual. Ethan had chalked it up to teething. Claire, sitting at the kitchen table and folding tiny onesies with a tenderness she'd never imagined herself capable of, noticed something different. "She's not eating," Claire said, glancing up as Ethan lifted Maddie from the high chair. "She's been cranky all day, probably just tired." Claire stood watching them closely. Her cheeks looked flushed. Ethan touched her forehead and frowned. She might be running warm. Claire's posture shifted, her shoulders tensed, and her eyes darkened with concern. "You think it's just a cold again?" Ethan asked. But Claire wasn't listening anymore. She was watching Maddie. And then it happened. A sound, barely a sound. A soft wheeze from Maddie's chest. Then another tighter. Then nothing. Ethan froze. Maddie's arms jerked slightly, then went limp in his hands. "Claire!" he whispered, voice already unraveling. Claire was already across the room, her phone tumbling to the floor. "Give her to me, Ethan, now." He passed the baby to her without thought, his hands trembling. Maddie's lips had begun to pale, her chest eerily still. "Oh, God," Ethan gasped. "She's not breathing." "Claire, she's not, call 911. Claire barked, lowering Maddie to the carpet. Now, Ethan stumbled backward, grabbing the phone, voice choked as he shouted the address. Claire tilted Maddie's head, gently checking her mouth, her airway. Her hands, those hands that once only held PowerPoints and pens, moved with practiced, desperate calm. She began back blows alternating with soft chest compressions, whispering beneath her breath with every motion. "Come on, baby. Come on, come on, come on." Maddie didn't move. Claire Ethan's voice cracked as he knelt beside her, eyes wide with terror. She's not." "Don't say it," Claire hissed. "She's not gone. She's not." Her voice broke on the last word. And then Claire did something Ethan never expected. She cradled Maddie against her chest and wept. She wasn't giving up, but something inside her had cracked open a dam of pain and regret and raw, unbearable love. "Please," she whispered into the baby's ear. "Please don't go. I couldn't save mine. Not then. Please let me save you now." Tears streamed down her face as she rocked back and forth, Maddie's still body pressed against her heart. And then a twitch. The smallest of movements. Maddie coughed. Claire froze, eyes wide, holding her breath as the child gave another weak cough, then another. A gasp. A cry. Then a piercing wail that filled the room with life. Ethan collapsed back against the wall, eyes wet, hands shaking. Claire couldn't stop crying, her face buried in Maddie's hair as she held the baby like something both sacred and fragile. The paramedics arrived minutes later. They rode to the hospital in the back of the ambulance, Claire holding Maddie in her arms, Ethan never letting go of Claire's hand. The diagnosis came quickly: an acute allergic reaction. Trace elements of ground peanuts in the store-bought baby food they'd tried that night. "She'll be okay," the doctor said. "You got to her in time. She's strong." But Claire barely heard him. In the corner of the room, Claire sat with Maddie in her lap, whispering to her, rocking slowly as if she feared stopping might make it all stop again. Ethan stood nearby, watching her. And for the first time, he didn't just see the woman who drove the SUV or the CEO who knew how to make a room silent with a sentence. He saw a mother, maybe not by birth, but by everything else. After Maddie had been cleared for release and finally drifted to sleep in the hospital crib, Claire walked outside for air. The night was thick with humidity. A storm had passed through. The sky was clearing one star at a time. Ethan followed her, but he didn't speak right away. He just stood beside her under the awning, both of them facing the quiet. She stopped breathing. Claire said, barely more than a breath. "I've never been that scared in my life." Ethan's voice was hoarse. "Me either." She turned to him. "You trusted me with her, and I almost—" "You saved her," he interrupted, firm. "You saved her." Claire shook her head. "I don't know what I would have done if—" She couldn't finish. Ethan took her hand. "You weren't just there, Claire. You didn't freeze. You didn't run. You stayed." She looked at him, eyes glassy, heart raw. "I kept thinking about my baby. The one I never held. I kept thinking this time I had to fight." "You did," he whispered. "And you won. They stood in silence, their joined hands the only thing unmoving in a world that had just tilted. Finally, Claire whispered, "I don't think I can go back." Ethan turned to her. "To the city, to that life. The one where I pretend I'm untouchable, where everything's numbers and quarterly goals and headlines. I used to think I had power, but tonight, I had Maddie's heartbeat. That's the only power I ever want again." He didn't reply. He just stepped closer, his hand brushing her cheek. "You're not broken, Claire. You just never had a place that let you be whole." She leaned into his touch, eyes closing. "Maybe this is that place," she whispered. "Maybe it's always been." In the distance, a train horn sounded soft, steady, echoing like a second chance. And in that moment, under the stars and the fading ache of fear, neither of them said the word love. But both of them heard it. Claire left before sunrise. No note, no goodbye. Just the soft click of the door and the echo of quiet footsteps down Ethan's porch stairs. Maddie was still asleep in her crib, curled beneath the flannel blanket Claire had tucked around her hours earlier. Ethan stirred briefly when he realized the other side of the bed was empty, but by the time he reached the front door, her SUV was already gone, swallowed into the misty dawn. He stood barefoot on the porch, heart still raw from the night before, and stared into the fog like he might somehow will her back into view. But she had disappeared. Again. Claire didn't cry on the drive back to the city. She didn't speak, didn't blink too long at the road signs, didn't fumble with the radio like she sometimes did to distract herself. She just drove fast, purposeful with every mile, creating distance between the world she'd nearly fallen into and the world she'd spent her life building. The skyline came into view as the sun broke through the horizon. Towering glass-clean lines, predictability. Her world. She parked beneath her penthouse building, rode the elevator in silence, and unlocked the door to a space that echoed with absence. The hum of nothing. Her phone had 27 missed calls. 22 of them were from Jared. "You ran," he said when she finally walked into her office. Jared was standing by the window tie, loosened, coffee untouched. His tone was less accusatory and more disappointed. Claire walked past him, dropped her purse on the desk, and sank into the leather chair behind it. "I needed space." Jared gave a low laugh. "Claire, you are space. You built your entire life around not letting anyone too close." She looked up at him, the exhaustion plain on her face. "You don't know what it was like." "I don't," he agreed. "But I know what it's like to watch someone about to find something real, only to shove it away because it doesn't fit into a business model." Claire turned her chair toward the window, trying to compose herself. It wasn't supposed to get that far. Feelings don't check in with your assistant, Claire. They just arrive. She didn't speak. Didn't need to. Jared reached into his satchel and pulled out something small wrapped in cloth. He set it gently on her desk and walked out without another word. Claire unwrapped it. It was the carved wooden heart Ethan had given her. Jared must have found it in her bag. He'd seen it before the day she first brought it to the office without realizing. But something was different. Inside the wrapping was also a folded piece of notebook paper worn at the edges. She recognized Ethan's handwriting immediately. "If you're reading this, it means you left again. Maybe you had to. Maybe the world got too loud and the silence here got too honest. I understand. I just hope this time you come back not because you feel guilty, but because you know you're already forgiven." Claire read the note 3 times before her hands stopped shaking. That night, she sat in the dark corner of her high-rise living room, curled into a blanket she no longer liked, listening to the traffic below and thinking about the sound of Maddie's laugh. The apartment felt sterile again, like something staged for a catalog. Her mind drifted to the soft creak of Ethan's porch swing, the quiet strength in his hands, the way he held his child like she was the axis of his world. And then her mother called. "I heard you've been off the grid," her voice clipped and poised as ever. "I hope this detour of yours hasn't ruined our Singapore expansion." Claire didn't have the energy for a fight. "I'm not going." Silence crackled like ice on the other end. "Excuse me, I said I'm not going. I don't need more cities or more power or another headline. I need something real." Her mother scoffed. "You're making a fool of yourself, Claire. You don't belong in that kind of life. You built yourself out of nothing, don't go back to it." Claire's grip tightened on the phone. "I didn't build myself out of nothing. I buried who I was to become what you expected." Her voice cracked, but she didn't stop. "I'm done performing." She hung up before her mother could respond. The next morning, Claire didn't dress for the office. She dressed like someone who remembered what it felt like to breathe. She packed a small bag, no laptop, no contracts, no conference shoes. Just the heart-shaped carving the note and a warm sweater Ethan once said brought out the color in her eyes. She got in the SUV and drove. Ethan was standing in the front yard watering the garden bed with Maddie strapped to his chest when he heard the crunch of tires on gravel. He turned slowly. Claire stepped out of the car holding nothing but a bouquet of wildflowers and a shy, searching look. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Maddie squealed. Claire's eyes welled instantly. Ethan reached for the buckle of the baby carrier and unlatched it slowly. Maddie reached out, arms open. Claire crossed the yard with uncertain steps and took Maddie into her arms. The child rested her cheek against Claire's chest, eyes fluttering shut in trust. Ethan watched them. Then, gently, he said, "I wasn't sure if you were coming back." Claire's voice was soft breaking. "Neither was I. And now I'm still scared," she admitted. "Me too." She looked up. "I'm not asking for guarantees. I'm not even asking for forgiveness." "You already have it," Ethan said. Claire took a shaky breath. "If she still smiles at me, maybe we could start from there." Ethan stepped forward, brushing a thumb across her cheek. She never stopped smiling. And as the wind rustled through the trees and the child sighed against her shoulder, Claire realized something she'd never dared to hope. She hadn't just come back. She had finally arrived. The clouds rolled in without warning. One moment, the sky above Ethan's home was a canvas of spring blue. The next, it dimmed to a moody gray pregnant with storm. Rain had always come to this part of town like a surprise visitor never invited, rarely kind, but often necessary. Ethan stood at the window cradling a mug of coffee, watching the drops begin to fall in soft, uncertain rhythm. Claire sat cross-legged on the floor nearby her back against the couch, hair loose around her shoulders. Maddie was napping in the next room. The house was wrapped in stillness, broken only by the ticking of the kitchen clock and the occasional creak of the roof settling under weight of weather. "I used to hate rain," Claire murmured. Ethan turned from the window. "City rain." She nodded. Always meant something got canceled. Events, deals, flights. It was a delay, a nuisance. And now she tilted her head toward the window. Now it feels like permission. Ethan smiled and lowered himself to the floor beside her. "Permission for what? To stop running," she said simply. "To sit still. To feel something that doesn't have a deadline attached." They were quiet a while. The kind of quiet that didn't demand conversation, just presence. Outside, the rain picked up pace, creating a soft percussion across the roof and windows. Inside, the weight between them shifted from uncertainty to something deeper, something unspoken. Later that afternoon, they cooked together. Claire, still in disbelief that she could be trusted to measure flour and hold Maddie at the same time, followed Ethan's lead as he showed her how to make his mother's biscuit recipe. Maddie sat in her high chair, gumming a silicone spoon and squealing whenever Claire dropped something, which of course was often. Claire laughed, really laughed, and Ethan couldn't stop watching her. There was flour on her sleeve, a smudge on her cheek, and an expression of joy so unfiltered it nearly took his breath away. She caught him staring. "What?" "Nothing," he said. "Just, you're here." She blinked. "Where else would I be?" Ethan hesitated. "Honestly, I didn't think you'd stay this long." Claire didn't answer right away. She dusted her hands off and leaned against the counter, eyes softer than he'd ever seen them. "I didn't either. When the storm passed, the town was washed clean." The three of them sat on the porch wrapped in blankets, watching the wet world glisten under the late afternoon light. Steam curled off the pavement. The trees dripped like they'd just emerged from something heavy. "I've been thinking," Claire said, her voice quiet. Ethan turned to her. Dangerous words. She smiled faintly. I've lived a long time making all the right moves. Perfect presentations. Profitable decisions. But nothing about this about you about Maddie was planned. And yet... She looked down at the baby asleep against her chest. This is the first thing that's ever made me feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Ethan exhaled. So what does that mean? Claire didn't answer with words. She pulled something from her coat pocket and handed it to him. A small envelope. He opened it. Inside was a letter formal typed with the letterhead of her company at the top. Her resignation as CEO. Effective immediately. Ethan stared at it, heart thudding. You're serious? Claire nodded. I'll stay on as a strategic advisor. Jared will take over interim leadership until they finalize a new candidate. But, Claire, this is your life. It was, she said. But I realized something the night Maddie stopped breathing. Her voice caught, but she continued. I realized I could spend the next 20 years accumulating more power, more money, more press, but none of it would matter if I couldn't hold on to the things that make life worth living. Ethan looked at her, at the fire in her eyes, at the vulnerability beneath the strength. You're not just stepping down, he said softly. You're stepping into something. Claire reached for his hand. Tell me this doesn't scare you. It does, he admitted. But so did being a father. So did losing Emma. So does waking up every day knowing I'm the only anchor Maddie has. He squeezed her hand. But everything worth holding has always scared me. They sat there a long time. Fingers entwined the baby's gentle breathing between them and the scent of rain rising from the earth like a benediction. That evening, Mrs. Gardner dropped by with fresh lemon muffins and a nose for news. You look different, she said to Claire, squinting at her. Claire grinned. I quit my job. Mrs. Gardner didn't miss a beat. About time. You've got better things to run now. Like what Claire asked. Like Saturday pancake mornings. And story time. And making sure that child knows she's got 2 people who would walk through fire for her. Claire blinked. 2 people. Mrs. Gardner patted her hand. You don't have to give birth to be someone's mother, honey. You just have to show up when it counts. She left them on the porch, the screen door slapping gently behind her. That night, as Ethan tucked Maddie into her crib and Claire stood in the doorway watching, she felt something shift inside her. It wasn't a jolt, not a lightning bolt. Just the steady, undeniable click of something falling perfectly into place. She'd never had a nursery, never sung lullabies, never lingered in doorways just to watch a child sleep. Until now. Ethan came up beside her and rested his hand on her back. You okay? She nodded. Then, softly, I'm home, aren't I? He looked at her. You always were. The town woke slowly the next morning, blanketed in birdsong and the smell of damp earth. The storm had passed, but the quiet it left behind lingered like something sacred. Claire stood barefoot in Ethan's kitchen hair pulled into a messy bun, wearing one of his flannel shirts over her cotton tee. She was trying and failing to get pancake batter off Maddie's forehead. How did it even get up there? She muttered, biting back a laugh. Maddie squealed in response, delighted by the mess. Ethan leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching the chaos with an amused smile. You gave her the whisk, he said. You told me she could handle it. I said she could hold it, he corrected, grinning. Not lead an abstract art movement with it. Claire shook her head, scooped up Maddie, and held her close, both of them giggling as she wiped the baby's face with a warm cloth. The moment wasn't perfect. There was flour on the floor, eggshells in the sink, and a burnt pancake in the trash, but it was theirs. And it was real. After breakfast, Ethan set up his workbench in the front yard. The sun had returned with a vengeance, drying the grass and filling the air with that golden glow reserved only for small-town summers. Maddie crawled around a blanket in the shade, her stuffed bunny in tow. Claire sat beside her, sketching something on a notepad, a shelving design for Maddie's room. Ethan had offered to build it. She insisted on helping. You know, she said, glancing up from her drawing, I'm not totally useless with tools. Ethan raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. I built a wine rack once. Did it hold wine for a while. That's not encouraging. Claire laughed a full rich sound that stopped Ethan's hands mid-measurement. He hadn't heard her laugh like that. Not a smirk, not a polite exhale, but a laugh born of lightness of someone forgetting their weight for a moment. He turned to look at her. She was still laughing, wiping tears from her eyes, shaking her head. "Sorry," she said, catching his expression. "It's just... you." He grinned. "Me. You always look so serious when you're measuring things, like it's a matter of national security." He glanced down at his ruler, then back at her. "In woodworking, accuracy is national security." Another laugh. Ethan took a breath. God, he thought this is what she's like when she forgets to protect herself. And he loved it. Later that afternoon, Jared arrived unannounced. Claire was on the porch swing, Maddie asleep in her arms when the sound of a rental car pulling up the gravel drive made her look up. Jared stepped out, tie-loosened sleeves rolled, holding a canvas tote bag and looking like he hadn't slept in 2 days. "Don't panic," he said as he approached. "I'm not here to drag you back." Claire smiled. "I wouldn't go if you tried." He offered the bag. "I brought a peace offering. And some files to review, only if you want." Ethan appeared in the doorway, curious but not unwelcoming. "Hi," Jared said, extending a hand. "Ethan," he replied, shaking it. They stood for a moment, 2 versions of stability in Claire's life, one buttoned up, one barefoot. Somehow, they didn't clash. Claire gestured to the empty rocking chair. "Sit. Tell me everything." Jared sat, glancing around. "This place? It's not what I expected." "What were you expecting?" Claire asked. "A cabin. Possibly bears." Claire laughed again, softly this time, but still real. Jared smiled. "There it is. What that sound? I haven't heard it since, I don't know. 2012. Claire rolled her eyes. "I laugh. Not like this." He looked at her more serious now. "You're different. And I mean that in the best way." Claire shifted Maddie slightly. "I feel different." Jared nodded. "You're softer, but not weaker." She looked at him, grateful. "Thank you for not trying to talk me out of this." He shrugged. "I came here to remind you of what you walked away from. But I think I just found what you walked into." He stood, brushing off his pants. "And honestly, I think this place suits you better than the corner office ever did." That evening, after Jared had driven back to the rental place and the sun had begun its descent behind the trees, Claire and Ethan stood on the porch watching Maddie play with her stacking rings in the grass. "I always thought happiness was something you had to fight for," Claire said, arms folded, eyes on her daughter. "Sometimes it is," Ethan replied. "But sometimes it's what's left when you stop fighting everything else." She nodded slowly. "You know," she said, glancing at him, "Jared called me softer." "He's not wrong." Claire looked amused. "You agree, I think you're stronger now than you've ever been." She was quiet a moment. Then, without ceremony, she slipped her hand into his. Ethan didn't flinch, didn't move. He just held it steady as ever. And Claire knew in that moment that all the walls she'd built weren't protection. They were barriers. And now without them, she didn't feel exposed. She felt free. That night, as she carried Maddie to bed, humming an off-key lullaby she'd learned from a children's video, Ethan watched from the doorway, arms crossed, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Claire turned around, her voice low. "She called me Mama today." Ethan blinked. "She did." Claire nodded, her eyes misty. "I didn't even realize it at first. But she meant me." Ethan stepped forward, pressing a soft kiss to Maddie's forehead, then resting his hand against Claire's cheek. "She's right," he said. "You are." And Claire, without apology or fear or second-guessing, let the tears fall. Not of grief, not of guilt, but of grace. The kind that comes when you finally become who you were always meant to be, and maybe, just maybe, who someone else needed you to be too. Autumn arrived quietly in the town, slipping into the trees with amber and rust, turning porches into places of warmth and memory. The wind no longer carried urgency. It carried whispers of change, of roots taking hold, of lives no longer waiting to begin. Claire stood at the edge of the small backyard garden Ethan had cultivated over the years, rows of carrots, thyme, and promise. Maddie toddled ahead in her tiny boots arms outstretched, chasing the last leaves as they fell in spirals through the golden air. Claire laughed, the sound as soft as the wind and just as sure. She no longer needed to borrow Ethan's flannel shirts. She had her own now, creased at the elbows, smelling of sawdust and cinnamon. Her heels were boxed away in a storage closet in the city along with her old life filed under used to be. "Don't go too far," she called out as Maddie veered toward the back fence. "She won't," Ethan said from the porch, stepping down with 2 steaming mugs of cider in hand. "She knows where home is." Claire turned as he reached her. The look between them no longer carried the weight of uncertainty. Now it held the quiet strength of something chosen day after day. They sipped in silence, watching Maddie drop to her knees and giggle into a pile of leaves, cheeks flushed, hair tangled. A world away from ventilators and hospital beeps. "She slept through the night," Claire said. "That's twice this week." "She called me Mama again this morning," Claire added softly. Ethan smiled. "I heard. Sounded like it came straight from the chest." Claire looked down. "Do you ever feel like you're still catching up? Like you missed 100 moments before this one?" Ethan took a slow breath. "Sometimes. But I think we spend too much time mourning the days we lost and not enough being grateful we showed up in time for the ones that matter." Claire nodded, her throat tightening. "I spent so many years chasing things I thought I needed. Accolades, power, some image of what strength looked like. But I never felt seen." She looked up at him. "Until now." He reached for her hand, squeezing gently. "That's because now you let someone see you." Later that afternoon, Mrs. Gardner stopped by, her arms full of fresh-baked hand pies and sass. "Well, if this isn't the coziest scene I've walked into all week," she announced, placing the basket on the kitchen counter. Claire beamed. "You're just in time. Ethan made his famous stew." Famous Mrs. Gardner raised an eyebrow. "He made it twice and forgot the salt both times." Ethan grinned. "It's a subtle flavor profile." They all laughed, and even Maddie let out a squeal that made the older woman's eyes glisten for a split second before she looked away, pretending to examine the curtain rod. When dinner wound down and the dishes were cleared, Mrs. Gardner handed Claire a small square box wrapped in faded floral paper. "It was my daughter's," she said, "but she's long gone and wouldn't mind one bit. Something told me you'd know what to do with it." Claire opened the box, slowly revealing a delicate gold locket. Inside was no photo, just room for one. Claire stared at it for a long moment before closing the clasp and nodding. "I do know." The following weekend, Jared returned for a visit. He parked his car beneath the changing trees, stepping out in casual clothes for the first time Claire could remember. No tie, no briefcase, just a calm expression and an easy stride. "You look alarmingly domestic," he said as Claire opened the door. "I bake now," she replied dryly. "God help us all." They shared a quiet laugh before walking out to the porch where Ethan was showing Maddie how to turn a screw in the side of her new toy chest. Jared sat beside Claire, observing the scene with something like reverence. "You did it," he said. Claire glanced at him. "Did what you stepped off the cliff and landed." She smiled. "I didn't fall. I flew." He pulled a manila folder from his bag and handed it to her. "What's this final paperwork? Transition of full leadership to the new CEO. Clean, painless. And here's the kicker, your mother signed off with only 3 passive-aggressive remarks." Claire chuckled. "That's a record." Also, Jared added, "We've renamed the company's new family support initiative." Claire raised an eyebrow. "To what?" He grinned. "The Whitmore Fund, in honor of women who choose differently, who begin again." She blinked back sudden tears, throat tightening. "Thank you." He reached over and squeezed her hand. "You made me believe in beginnings again." That night, Ethan tucked Maddie into bed while Claire stood in the doorway, her fingers brushing the gold locket around her neck. Inside it, now a photo, small and slightly crumpled, of her Ethan and Maddie in the garden, laughing. The family she chose, and who chose her right back. Ethan turned his voice low. "You ready?" Claire nodded. They stepped outside under the stars, the sky clear and wide above them. The porch swing creaked as they settled in together side by side, hands entwined, their knees touching just enough to remind them they were never alone again. "I keep thinking," Claire said, "about all the roads that led here, all the ones I took trying to be someone I wasn't. And yet," Ethan murmured, "this was the detour that mattered." She leaned her head on his shoulder, breathing in the scent of wood smoke and pine. "I didn't think I deserved this." He kissed the top of her head. "You didn't have to. You just had to be willing to stay." And there, in the soft hush of night, with a child asleep inside and a future uncharted ahead, Claire Whitmore made peace with every version of herself. Not the CEO, not the woman who ran, but the woman who turned around and came home. Forever. Where are you watching from? We love hearing from viewers all around the world, so drop a comment and let us know. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell so you never miss another soul-stirring tale. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. Your presence means more than you know. Until next time, stay kind, stay hopeful, and keep believing in the unexpected.